The morning I found out my brother-in-law had forged my name on a $150,000 federal loan, I was sitting in my car in the parking garage beneath my office building in downtown Austin, eating a granola bar and catching up on emails before my 8 o'clock. My phone rang from a number I didn't recognize, a 512 area code, which usually meant a local business or a spam call. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Is this Nola Whitman?" the man on the other end asked. "Speaking. This is James Harding from First National Bank, Commercial Lending Division. I'm calling to follow up on the SBA loan disbursement that funded yesterday. We need to schedule your co-borrower onboarding appointment." I remember holding the granola bar halfway to my mouth, completely still. "I'm sorry, what loan?" The silence on his end lasted exactly long enough for my stomach to drop. By the time I reached my attorney's office that afternoon, I had already received the text from my sister. It came in while I was waiting for the elevator in the lobby of his building, and I read it 3 times before I could process the words. "You've always had a problem watching other people succeed. Craig told me what you did. Stop trying to tear apart what we've built. Leave us alone." I typed back 2 words, "I'm done." Then I walked into Mr. Dunning's office, set my phone face down on his desk, and told him everything. My sister and I grew up in San Antonio, 2 years apart, in a house that smelled like tamales on Sunday mornings and motor oil from our dad's toolbox in the garage. She was the older one, the one who wore mascara to 8th grade, and knew how to make every person in a room feel like the most interesting person there. I was quieter. I spent Friday nights doing practice ATs and genuinely didn't mind. We were close in the way sisters can be when they've shared everything from a bathroom to a bunk bed. Different people, different paths, but the same foundation. After college, I moved to Austin and built a career in financial analysis. I'm good at numbers the way some people are good at reading rooms, instinctively, without having to try. By 31, I had a job I was proud of, a 1-bedroom apartment near South Congress, and a savings account that reflected years of deliberate choices. It wasn't glamorous, but it was entirely mine. My sister's path took longer to find its shape. A few years of different jobs, a yoga certification, some part-time work at a wellness studio. She was figuring it out. Our parents helped when she needed it, and that's what family does. I never judged her for any of it. Then she met my brother-in-law. He came into her life about 3 years ago, right when she had started to feel like she was finally landing somewhere. He was the kind of confidant that fills up a room before he's finished walking into it. The type who orders for the whole table before anyone's done, looking at the menu and somehow makes everyone feel taken care of rather than steamrolled. He told people he was a real estate developer. He had a LinkedIn full of property photos and a business card that read Craig Holloway, Principal. Holloway Property Group. My sister fell hard and fast. By the time I met him at a family barbecue at my parents' house 6 months into their relationship, she was already talking about the future in the plural. I shook his hand, watched him flip burgers like he owned the backyard, and told myself to stay open. He made my sister happy. That felt like enough. They got married 14 months later at a vineyard outside Fredericksburg. Our parents cried. I gave a toast. My brother-in-law hugged me after and said, "We're family now. I mean that." I believed him. The first time something felt off was at Thanksgiving, about 6 months after the wedding. We were all at my parents' house. My mom's green bean casserole, football on in the background, the usual. After dinner, my brother-in-law had spent a long stretch talking with my dad about retirement finances. How much they had in their IRAs, whether they had an advisor's, what their monthly overhead looked like, now that they were both fully retired. My dad answered freely, the way people do when they've stopped seeing money as something to guard. I noticed it, but told myself he was probably just thinking like a real estate person, always running numbers. Later, when my sister went to help our mom in the kitchen, and I was left alone with him at the dining room table, over the last of the pecan pie, he turned those questions on me. "So what do you actually do day to day at your firm? Not small talk. Specific." I gave him the general version: financial modeling, risk analysis for commercial clients. You must have a solid credit profile, he said, cutting into the pie. That kind of income, steady W-2 employment. Banks love that. I said something neutral. I ask because we're looking at structuring some things for Holloway Property Group next quarter. It would be useful to know what your score looks like. Not that it matters right now. He smiled. Just curious about the landscape. I changed the subject. He let me. But the question sat with me on the drive back to Austin like a stone in my shoe. Not painful exactly, but impossible to ignore. The second incident happened in January. 6 weeks later, my brother-in-law emailed me a 43-page LLC operating agreement and asked me to just take a look since you work with this kind of stuff. He was formalizing the structure of Holloway Property Group, he said, and wanted a family member who understood finance to weigh in before they brought in outside capital, including, he mentioned, a $65,000 commitment from my parents' retirement savings. I read the agreement on a Sunday afternoon with coffee going cold beside me. On page 18, tucked inside a section on asset management, was a clause granting the managing member, my brother-in-law, authority to use LLC assets, including pledged collateral from co-investors, to secure additional financing without requiring approval from other members. In plain English, he could borrow against my parents' money without asking them first. I called my sister that evening. I was careful. I wasn't accusatory. I said something like, I flagged a clause you might want to review before Mom and Dad sign anything. It gives Craig a lot of unilateral authority over the collateral. She listened. Then, Craig warned me you might say something like this. That stopped me cold. What does that mean? He said you've always been a little skeptical of him. That you have a hard time watching other people succeed. A pause. I'm not saying that's what I think. I'm just telling you what he said. I told her I was trying to protect our parents. She said she appreciated it, but that Craig had lawyers reviewing everything, and I was misreading standard contract language. She asked me to trust her. I sat with my phone in my lap a long time after we hung up. I didn't push further. My parents signed the agreement 2 weeks later and transferred $65,000 from their IRA into the fund. The third warning came in March, on a Saturday afternoon. My brother-in-law texted and asked if I could meet him and my sister at a rental property they were considering in Cedar Park. They wanted my professional read on the financials before making an offer. My sister confirmed she'd be there. I drove the 40 minutes from Austin. When I pulled up to the address, my brother-in-law was standing out front. My sister's car wasn't there. He said she'd had a last-minute conflict at the studio and would try to make it. He walked me through the house. 3 bedrooms, decent bones, a backyard that needed work. Then we sat at the kitchen island where he'd set up folding chairs, and he slid a folder across to me. Inside was a co-borrower application for an SBA loan. $150,000. My name, my social security number, my employer, my income all pre-filled. He explained it was just for the property acquisition, that the bank required a co-borrower with strong W-2 income, and that I'd never be responsible for actual payments. He said my parents had already thought it was a good idea. He said my sister was on board. I looked at the documents. I looked at him. I put the papers back in the folder and pushed it across the counter. I'm not signing this today, I said. His expression didn't shift. He said there was no pressure, that we could talk it over as a family. He walked me back to where I'd parked. He waved when I pulled away. The whole interaction was so calm and controlled that it wasn't until I was back on the highway that I noticed my hands were shaking. 2 weeks later, the bank called. My attorney, Mr. Dunning, had handled my employment contract and a lease dispute years earlier. He was methodical and unexcitable in a way that felt like an anchor that afternoon. He looked at the loan documents the bank had faxed over. He looked at the signatures. He looked at me. You're certain you never signed these? 100%. He picked up his phone and called the FBI's financial crimes tip line before I'd finished my coffee. I drove home that evening in the kind of numb that comes after too much adrenaline burns itself out. My sister had stopped responding to my texts after her initial message. My parents called and I answered and gave them enough to worry without giving them the full picture yet. I didn't sleep. The FBI assigned an agent named Agent Weston to the case. She was precise, direct, and never once made me feel like I was overreacting. She explained that forging a co-borrower's signature on a federally backed loan was a federal crime. Wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft. She said they would move carefully but quickly. I gave her everything. The email with the LLC agreement, my notes from the Thanksgiving conversation, the Cedar Park address, the date I'd been shown the pre-filled documents. I told her about my parents' $65,000 investment. She wrote down every word. On day 3, she called me back and told me to sit down. Your brother-in-law has a prior federal conviction, she said. Wire fraud in Ohio 6 years ago. He used his then-girlfriend's mother's credit information to secure a business line of credit. He served 18 months in federal prison, then relocated. I sat on the floor of my kitchen because my legs stopped working. Does my sister know? I asked. Not yet. I thought about the first time I'd shaken his hand at the barbecue. I thought about we're family now. I mean that. When the FBI came to my sister's door, she didn't believe them. That's what she told me weeks later. Her first instinct was that there had been some clerical error, some crossed wire in a system that gets things wrong. She told them Craig was at a showing and to call him directly. They showed her the Ohio conviction records. They showed her the forged loan documents with my signature, produced from a scan of my handwriting, taken from a holiday card envelope I'd addressed to my parents 3 years earlier. One that had somehow ended up in my brother-in-law's possession. They showed her the LLC financials, which revealed that every dollar of my parents' $65,000 had been routed through 2 shell accounts and used to pay off private debts my brother-in-law owed to a lender in Columbus, Ohio. My parents' retirement money was gone. My sister called me that night. She was the one crying. I didn't know about Ohio, she said. Nola, I swear to you, I did not know. He told me you'd agreed to sign and then changed your mind to spite us. He said you were trying to control me the same way you'd always controlled things. And I believed him. I believed him over you. I held the phone and didn't say anything for a while. I know you did, I finally said. He's very good at what he does. The FBI arrested my brother-in-law 2 days later at a coffee shop in Round Rock. He was apparently making calls, still thinking he had time. They took him in without incident. The charges were federal, wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, and a probation violation from Ohio. My sister cooperated fully and immediately. Every document, every email, every bank statement she could access. Her attorney negotiated with federal prosecutors, and because she had no prior record and her cooperation was complete and immediate, she was not charged. She testified for the prosecution. At trial, my brother-in-law's defense attorney argued that I had verbally agreed to co-sign and later reversed course, turning a family misunderstanding into a criminal allegation. Agent Weston dismantled that in under 20 minutes. Digital metadata on the loan application showed it had been submitted from his laptop at a time when I was documented at work 30 miles away. The handwriting analyst testified that the signature had been produced from a scanned image of my name, specifically from that holiday card envelope. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the federal judge gave him 11 years, noting that exploiting familial trust to access victims' financial identities was an aggravating factor, and that his prior Ohio conviction demonstrated a pattern of predatory behavior that showed no indication of remorse. The FBI was able to freeze and liquidate enough of his assets to recover approximately $40,000 of my parents' $65,000. It wasn't everything. My dad cried when Agent Weston called to tell him. My mom made me lunch and didn't say much, which is how she handles the things that are too big for words. The conversation I'd been both dreading and needing with my sister happened on a Sunday afternoon in late December. In a diner booth off Congress Avenue, she drove up from San Antonio. She ordered coffee and barely touched it. I knew something was wrong, she said. Not about the fraud. I genuinely had no idea about any of that. But I knew something wasn't right in how he talked about you, about Mom and Dad. He always had a reason why I should trust him more than the people who had actually known me my whole life. And I let it happen because I wanted what we had to be real so badly. I thought about page 18 of the LLC agreement. I thought about her voice on the phone saying, "Craig warned me. You might say something like this." "I know," I said. "I said terrible things to you." "You did." She looked up and I held her gaze. "I'm not going to tell you it's fine," I said, "because it wasn't. But I understand how it happened. He didn't just lie to you about specifics. He slowly redrew your entire picture of the people around you, and you didn't notice while it was happening because you trusted the person doing it. That's not stupidity. That's how this works." She wiped her eyes quickly, the way she always has, like she doesn't want anyone to catch her at it. We didn't fix everything that afternoon. That was never going to happen over one cup of coffee. But we talked for 2 hours, and when we left, she hugged me in the parking lot, and I hugged her back, and I meant every second of it. Rebuilding is not the same as returning. What was before is gone, and I've stopped pretending otherwise. What we're building now is slower, more deliberate, and in some ways more honest, because we've both stopped assuming that love and safety are the same thing. Love is a choice you keep making. Safety is something you have to actively tend to. My parents moved their remaining retirement savings to a fee-only fiduciary advisor with no connection to any family member or family associate. A boundary I helped them set, and one they've told me they feel better for. My mom joined a book club. My dad built a workbench for the garage. They're okay. My sister is in therapy. She's teaching yoga again at a studio, where a friend of mine vouched for the ownership before she walked in. We have dinner on FaceTime every other Sunday. It's not what we were, but it's getting to be something real again. A few months after the trial, Agent Weston asked if I'd be willing to speak at a financial literacy event, co-sponsored by her field office and the Austin chapter of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. She said my experience, particularly the way my brother-in-law had used existing family trust to harvest personal financial information over time, was something everyday people needed to understand in concrete terms, not abstractions. I said yes. Standing in front of 60 people in a community center in East Austin, I talked about what financial exploitation inside a family actually looks like. I talked about the clause on page 18. I talked about the Thanksgiving questions that sounded like interest and turned out to be reconnaissance. I talked about the Cedar Park property showing up empty, about a folder pushed across a kitchen counter, about trusting an instinct that I'd been conditioned to doubt. Afterward, a woman in her mid-50s came up and told me her son-in-law had been asking for similar financial information the previous month, and she hadn't known how to name what felt wrong about it. She had the FBI financial crimes tip line written down before I'd even finished saying it out loud. That was the moment I understood that telling this story wasn't the same as reliving it. It was something that moved forward and took other people with it. If someone in your life is asking questions about your finances that feel more like an audit than a conversation, pay attention to that feeling. If a family member tells you that you're being paranoid for reading a contract carefully, read it more carefully. If you're shown documents that are pre-filled with your personal information that you never provided, that information came from somewhere, and you need to know where. I didn't lose my sister. I came close, and that closeness still wakes me up sometimes at 3 in the morning. But we found our way back to each other through the wreckage of something that was designed to separate us permanently. And that means something I don't have the right words for yet. What I know is this: the people who exploit family trust count on you staying quiet out of love. They know that love makes people hesitate, makes them give benefit of the doubt, makes them choose the relationship over the warning sign. My brother-in-law built his entire scheme on that assumption. He was wrong. And the moment I typed "done" in that elevator and walked into my attorney's office, I think some part of me already knew it.